The ship was falling apart around him when Danny Cole lost consciousness. He remembered fire, screaming alarms, and the cold emptiness of space rushing in through a torn hull. He remembered thinking about his mother back in Ohio, wondering if she would ever know what happened to her son. When he woke up, he was not dead. He almost wished he was. Danny opened his eyes to find himself in a room made entirely of crystal. The walls glowed with a soft purple light. The air smelled strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. His uniform was gone, replaced by a simple gray robe. His hands were not bound, but when he tried to stand, his legs gave out beneath him. A door slid open with a soft hiss. Danny looked up and saw her for the first time. Queen of the Empire stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her body was covered in silver scales that caught the light like thousands of tiny mirrors. Her eyes were large and completely violet, with no white part at all. She had no hair, but a crown of bone-like ridges rose from her head like a natural tiara. She moved without sound, gliding across the floor as if she weighed nothing at all. Danny had seen soldiers in battle. They were terrifying. But this female was something else entirely. She was beautiful in a way that made his human brain struggle to understand. "You are awake," she said. Her voice was cold and clear, like ice cracking on a winter lake. "Good. I was beginning to think your species was too fragile to survive capture." Danny tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The queen made a small gesture and a servant appeared with water. Danny drank it desperately, not caring if it was poisoned. If they wanted him dead, he would already be dead. "Why am I here?" he finally managed to ask. The queen tilted her head, studying him like a scientist might study an insect. "Your ship wandered into our territory. Your people have been causing problems at our borders. I thought it would be useful to learn more about you." "I'm just a lieutenant," Danny said. "I don't know any military secrets." "I do not want your secrets," the queen replied. "I want to understand what you are." And so began Danny's life as a captive in the Crystal Palace of Velar Prime. The days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months. Danny expected to be tortured or experimented on. Instead, he was treated almost like a guest. He had comfortable quarters, good food, and freedom to walk in certain gardens. But he could not leave. Guards watched him always, and the walls of the palace were impossible to escape. Queen visited him often. At first, she asked simple questions about human biology. Why did humans need so much sleep? Why did their bodies produce heat? Why did they have hair on their heads but not on their arms? Danny answered honestly. He had no reason to lie, and he found that talking helped pass the time. The queen listened carefully to everything he said, her violet eyes never blinking. But slowly her questions changed. "What is love?" she asked one evening, sitting across from him in his quarters. Outside the window, 2 moons hung in a purple sky. Danny was surprised by the question. "Love? You don't have love." "We have duty," the queen said. "We have loyalty. We have biological drives to reproduce. But your people speak of something more. Your stories are full of it. Your soldiers cry out for loved ones when they die. What is this thing?" Danny thought carefully before answering. "Love is when someone else's happiness becomes more important than your own. When you would do anything for them, sacrifice anything just to see them smile. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense. But it's the most powerful thing humans have." The queen was silent for a long time. "That sounds like weakness," she finally said. "Maybe," Danny admitted. "But it's also what makes us strong. Love is why we fight. Love is why we never give up." The queen left without another word that night. But she came back the next evening, and the evening after that. She asked about hope. She asked about dreams. She asked about family and friendship and all the things that made humans human. Danny talked for hours, telling her about his childhood in Ohio, about his mother's cooking, about the way autumn leaves looked when they fell from the trees. He told her about his first love, a girl named Amy who broke his heart in high school. He told her about his best friend who died in training, and how he still talked to him sometimes when he was alone. The queen never shared anything about herself, but Danny noticed small changes in her. She began to sit closer to him. Her voice became slightly warmer. Once, when he made a joke, he thought he saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward. One night, nearly a year after his capture, the queen came to his quarters very late. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, saying nothing. Danny could see that something was different. Her scales seemed to shimmer with colors he had not seen before. Her breathing was faster than usual. "I do not understand what is happening to me," she said quietly. "I have ruled for 200 years. I have never felt uncertain. I have never felt afraid. But when I am near you, I feel things I cannot name." Danny's heart beat faster. He knew he should be careful. She was an alien queen, his captor, the enemy of his people. But he had spent a year talking to her, learning her, seeing glimpses of something hidden beneath that cold exterior. "I feel it too," he admitted. The queen crossed the room in 3 swift steps. She stood before him, so close he could feel the surprising warmth of her breath. Her hand reached out and touched his face. Her scales were smooth and cool against his skin. "This is madness," she whispered. "Yes," Danny agreed. But neither of them pulled away. 9 months later, Queen did something that had never happened in the entire history of her species. An unbonded queen, a ruler without a mate selected by the council, laid a single egg. She told her people it was a miracle from the gods. She told her priests that she had been blessed. She told no one the truth. And Danny Cole was quietly moved to a distant tower, forbidden to speak of what had happened, forbidden to see the child that was half his own. He watched from his window as the palace celebrated the arrival of a princess. He watched and waited and wondered if he would ever hold his daughter in his arms. The princess was named, which meant light between stars in the ancient language. From the moment she hatched, everyone knew she was different. Normal bobbies emerged from their eggs cold and silent. They did not cry. They did not move much. They simply opened their eyes and looked at the world with the same cold calculation that marked their species, but was not normal. When her egg cracked open in the royal birthing chamber, the baby inside made a sound no one had ever heard before. She laughed. It was a small, bubbling sound that echoed off the crystal walls and made everyone in the room freeze in shock. Queen held her daughter for the first time and felt something break open inside her chest. The baby looked up at her with large eyes that were mostly violet like all, but there were flecks of brown in them, tiny spots of warmth that did not belong. Danny's eyes. The queen held her daughter and said nothing. As the months passed, more differences became clear, grew faster than other children. By the time she was 1 year old, she could walk and speak simple words. Normal children took 3 years to reach that point. Her scales were different too. Most had silver scales that reflected light in cold, sharp ways, but had scales that shimmered with soft colors like oil floating on water. When she was happy, they seemed to glow with gentle warmth. When she was sad, they turned a deeper shade of blue. And she felt things. That was the strangest part of all. Children did not show emotions. They learned from birth to hide any feelings they might have, to present a calm and logical face to the world. Emotions were seen as weaknesses, things that lesser species suffered from, but could not hide what she felt, even if she wanted to. She smiled when she was happy. She cried when she was hurt. She hugged her mother with small arms and told her, "I love you," in a mix of, and the human words she somehow knew without being taught. The court watched and whispered. "She is blessed by the gods," the high priests declared. "A new kind of evolved to lead us into a better future." But not everyone believed. General, the commander of the queen's armies, watched the child with narrow eyes. He had served the empire for over a century. He had seen many strange things, and he did not believe in miracles. In his private chambers, he began to collect evidence. Meanwhile, in his tower on the far side of the palace, Danny Cole lived a half-life of waiting and wondering. He was comfortable enough. He had food, water, books to read, a window with a view of the Crystal Gardens. But he was alone, always alone, forbidden to speak to anyone about the daughter he had never met. His only connection to the outside world was a human woman named Lisa. Lisa had been captured 3 years before Danny, taken from a research station near the border. She worked as a servant in the palace, cleaning floors and carrying messages. She was smart and careful, and she had learned to move through the palace without being noticed. Every few days, she would find a reason to visit Danny's tower. She would bring him extra food, news from the human captives scattered throughout the palace, and most importantly, stories about the princess. She found a human book today, Lisa told him one evening, sitting on the floor of his small room. I don't know where she got it. Children's stories, I think. She carries it everywhere now. She made me read it to her 3 times. Danny's heart ached. What did she think of it? She loved it. She kept pointing at the pictures and asking questions. She wanted to know why the humans in the pictures had so many different colors of hair. She wanted to know why they smiled so much. Lisa paused. She told me humans seem kind. Danny turned away so Lisa would not see the tears in his eyes. His daughter was out there, growing up without him, and she was drawn to humans without even knowing why. Some part of her knew. Some part of her remembered. Can you give her something from me? Danny asked. Lisa shook her head sadly. It's too dangerous. If anyone found out, the Queen would have us both killed, and is watching everything. He suspects something, I'm sure of it. Danny nodded. He understood, but understanding did not make it hurt any less. The months continued to pass, grew from a baby into a toddler, then into a small child with quick feet and a quicker mind. She learned to speak 3 languages before she was 2. She memorized the names of every star visible from the palace windows. She asked questions constantly about everything in a way that drove her tutors crazy. But her favorite questions were always about humans. Why do humans cry? She asked her mother one night as tucked her into her sleeping pod. The Queen hesitated. Because they feel things very strongly. Their bodies cannot contain their emotions, so the feelings leak out through their eyes. That sounds beautiful, said. It is considered a weakness by our people. Was quiet for a moment. I don't think it's weak. I think it's brave, to show people how you feel even when it hurts. Looked at her daughter, this impossible child who was teaching her things she had never learned in 200 years of living. Perhaps you are right, she said softly. Mother asked, why don't I have a father? The question hit like a physical blow. She had known this moment would come. She had prepared answers, careful lies that would satisfy a child's curiosity. But looking into those brown-flecked eyes, she found she could not speak them. You have a father, she finally said, but I cannot tell you about him, not yet. Someday when you are older you will understand. Accepted this answer, as children often accept the mysteries their parents give them. But that night, she dreamed of a man with warm brown eyes and a kind smile. He held out his arms to her and called her name. When she woke up, her pillow was wet with tears. In his tower, miles away across the Crystal Gardens, Danny woke from the same dream at the same moment. He had seen his daughter running toward him, laughing, calling him father. He had felt her small arms around his neck. And then he had woken to cold reality and an empty room. He stood at his window and looked out at the palace glowing in the light of the 2 moons. Somewhere in there, his daughter was growing up without him. Somewhere in there, a queen was trying to hide a truth that could not stay hidden forever. Danny did not know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Someday, somehow, he would hold his daughter in his arms, even if it was the last thing he ever did. The day of the princess's 3rd hatching anniversary arrived with great celebration across the empire. Ships came from 100 different worlds, carrying nobles and diplomats and merchants who wanted to see the miracle child with their own eyes. The Crystal Palace had never been so full. Queen watched the preparations with growing worry. She had ruled for 200 years by keeping control of every situation, by knowing every secret, by staying 10 steps ahead of her enemies. But this situation had slipped beyond her control long ago. Every day that passed looked more and more like her father. Every day, the whispers grew louder. And General was watching, always watching. The general had been gathering evidence for nearly 2 years. He had bribed servants. He had stolen medical records. He had compared the princess's genetic code to the database of every species known to the Empire, and he had found exactly what he expected to find. Human DNA, mixed with the royal bloodline. Was not a fool. He knew that exposing this secret would cause chaos. He knew that many in the Empire would be horrified. But he also knew that chaos created opportunity. If the queen fell, someone would need to take her place, and had spent his entire life preparing for exactly that. On the morning of the celebration, he set his plan in motion. Danny was reading by his window when the soldiers came. There were 6 of them, all wearing the black armor of personal guard. They did not knock. They simply broke down his door and dragged him from his room before he could speak a single word. They beat him as they carried him through the palace, not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to leave him bloody and dazed. Danny tried to fight back, but he was one human against 6 warriors. It was hopeless. He was dragged through corridor after corridor, past hundreds of confused nobles who stared at the bleeding human in shock. Finally, they reached the great throne room, where the celebration was in full swing. The room fell silent as the soldiers threw Danny onto the floor before the assembled court. Queen rose from her throne, her face carefully blank, but Danny could see the fear in her eyes. "General," she said, her voice cold as winter, "explain yourself." Stepped forward with a smile that made Danny's blood run cold. The general was tall even for a, with scales the color of dark iron and eyes that held no warmth at all. He carried a small device in his hand, glowing with data. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing just enough to be correct but not enough to show respect. "I apologize for disrupting the celebration, but I have uncovered a threat to the Empire that cannot wait." "What threat?" Turned to face the crowd of nobles, diplomats, and priests who filled the throne room. His voice boomed across the crystal walls. "For 3 years we have been told that the princess is a miracle, a gift from the gods, a new evolution of our species, blessed with abilities we have never seen before." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "It is a lie." Gasps echoed through the room. Queen gripped the arms of her throne so hard that her claws left marks in the crystal. Held up his device. "I have here the genetic analysis of Princess. I had it performed by 3 separate laboratories, all of which reached the same conclusion." He pointed at Danny, who was struggling to rise from the floor. "This human is the princess's father." The silence that followed was absolute. Danny could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "The queen mated with a prisoner," continued, his voice dripping with disgust. "She created a half-breed and tried to pass it off as a divine blessing. She has lied to us all. She has contaminated the royal bloodline with alien filth." Nobles began shouting. Some called for the queen's arrest. Others defended her. Arguments broke out across the throne room. The careful order of society was crumbling in real time. "Silence," commanded. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The room fell quiet again, though the tension remained thick enough to touch. The queen stood slowly, her silver scales shimmering in the light. She looked at Danny, still bleeding on the floor. She looked at, standing triumphant before her, and she made a decision that would change everything. "It is true," she said. More gasps, more shock. Even seemed surprised that she had admitted it so easily. "Lieutenant Danny Cole is the father of my daughter," continued. "He was not a random prisoner. He was a man who taught me things I had forgotten I could learn. He taught me about love, about warmth, about what it means to feel alive. She paused, her voice softening. He taught me to be more than a cold ruler on a crystal throne. Smile returned. A touching confession, but it changes nothing. By the laws of our empire, you have committed treason against your own blood. The human must be executed, and the princess must be examined to determine if she is fit to remain in the line of succession. He turned to his soldiers. Kill the human. Danny closed his eyes. He had always known this moment might come. He had always known that loving an alien queen would probably cost him his life. But as the soldiers raised their weapons, he did not think about death. He thought about his daughter, the little girl he had never held, the child who carried his eyes in her beautiful face. He hoped she would be safe. He hoped she would remember the human stories she loved. He hoped she would grow up to be someone who could feel things in a galaxy that had forgotten how. The soldiers took aim. And then a small voice rang out across the throne room. Stop! Everyone turned. A small figure was pushing through the crowd of nobles, shoving past legs and robes with determined strength. Princess emerged into the open space before the throne, her iridescent scales glowing with emotions she could not hide. She looked at the bleeding man on the floor. She looked at his face, his hair, his eyes. His eyes. She had seen those eyes before, in her dreams, every night for as long as she could remember. Everything suddenly made sense. The warmth she felt inside, the human stories she loved, the dreams of a kind man who called her name. The pieces came together in her young mind like a puzzle finally complete. Before anyone could stop her, ran across the throne room floor. Her small feet made almost no sound on the crystal tiles. Guards reached for her and missed. Nobles tried to grab her and failed. She crashed into the kneeling human with all the force her small body could manage. Her arms wrapped around his neck. And she looked up at him with those impossible brown-flecked eyes and shouted one word that echoed off every wall in the palace. Father! The word hung in the air, every voice died, every movement stopped. No one in the palace could speak. Danny looked down at the tiny face pressed against his chest. Tears he could not control streamed down his cheeks. His arms, shaking with emotion and blood loss, wrapped around his daughter for the first time. "Hello," he whispered. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." And in that moment, everything changed. The silence in the throne room lasted for what felt like hours. In reality, it was only a few seconds, but those seconds stretched like years. Every noble, every guard, every servant stood frozen, watching the impossible scene before them. A princess of the empire, the supposed miracle child, was clinging to a human prisoner and calling him father. And the human was crying. Tears rolled down his face in a way that most had never seen before. The warm, wet evidence of emotion that their species had abandoned thousands of years ago. Did not let go of Danny. She held him, pressing her small face against his chest as if she could hear his heartbeat through his ribs. And she could. It was fast and strong, and it felt like home. "I knew you were real," she whispered. "Everyone said my dreams were just dreams, but I knew." Danny could not speak. His throat was too tight, his heart too full. He simply held his daughter and let the tears fall where they would. Queen descended from her throne. She moved slowly, her silver scales catching the light with every step. The crowd parted before her without a sound. She walked across the throne room floor until she stood before Danny and looking down at them with an expression no one could read. General found his voice first. "Your Majesty, this changes nothing. The law is clear. The human must be executed and the child must be removed from succession. I insist that we proceed immediately." The queen did not look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on her daughter, this impossible child who had shown more courage in the last minute than most showed in their entire lives. Had run across a room full of enemies, past armed soldiers, to embrace a man she had never met but somehow always known. That was not weakness. That was strength of a kind had never understood until now. "No," the queen said quietly. His eyes narrowed. "Your Majesty." I said no. Finally turned to face the general, and her expression made him take a step back. She was not the cold, calculating ruler he had served for decades. She was something else, something new, something dangerous. "For 200 years," she said, "I ruled this empire the way our ancestors taught us to rule, without emotion, without mercy, without love. I conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. I made decisions that cost millions of lives without feeling anything at all." She looked back at Danny and, still holding each other on the floor. "And I was empty," she continued. "Hollow. A shell sitting on a throne, going through the motions of living without ever being truly alive. Until this human came into my palace and showed me what I was missing." The crowd was utterly silent. No one had ever heard the queen speak like this before. "He taught me that emotions are not weaknesses to be eliminated," said. "They are strengths that make life worth living. Hope gives us reason to continue when all seems lost. Love gives us something to fight for beyond ourselves. And this child, our child, is proof that two species can come together and create something better than either could create alone." His face twisted with rage. "This is madness. You would destroy thousands of years of tradition for a human, for feelings. I would destroy anything that stands between me and my family." The word hung in the air. Family. It was a human concept, one that had abandoned long ago in favor of political alliances and arranged matings, but spoke it like it was the most natural thing in the world. She knelt beside Danny, and her silver scales touching the crystal floor. For the first time in public, in front of her entire court, the queen showed vulnerability. She reached out and placed her hand on her daughter's back. "I was wrong to hide you from your father," she said softly too. "I was afraid. I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting myself." Looked up at her mother with those brown-flecked eyes. "You were scared." "Yes. But you're the queen. Queens don't get scared." Smiled sadly. "Everyone gets scared, little one. The brave ones just keep going anyway." Danny finally found his voice. It was rough from emotion, but clear enough to be heard throughout the silent room. "Whatever happens to me doesn't matter. Just keep her safe, please. That's all I ask." Shook her head. "Nothing is going to happen to you, either of you." General had heard enough. He drew his ceremonial blade, a weapon passed down through generations of military commanders. It gleamed with deadly light in the glow of the crystal walls. "Then you leave me no choice," he said. "Guards, arrest the queen, the human, and the child. They will all stand trial for treason against the empire." His soldiers stepped forward, but they hesitated. Their weapons were raised, but their eyes were uncertain. They had sworn loyalty to the general, but they had also sworn loyalty to the crown. And something about this scene, this human crying over his child, this queen kneeling with her family, made them pause. "Think carefully about what you are doing," said to the soldiers. "General would use you to seize power for himself. He does not care about tradition or purity. He only cares about his own ambition." His face turned dark. "Lies. I'm trying to save the empire from contamination." "You are trying to destroy my family." The soldiers looked at each other. Years of training told them to follow orders. But something deeper, something that might have been emotion, told them this was wrong. In the crowd, Lisa watched with growing hope. She had spent years as a quiet servant, invisible to the nobles around her. But she had been waiting for this moment. She had been preparing for it. She caught the eye of another human servant across the room, then another, and another. Throughout the throne room, scattered among the nobles, human captives began to move slowly toward each other. Saw the hesitation in his soldiers and made his decision. If they would not act, he would. He lunged forward with his blade, aiming straight for Danny's heart. Screamed. But before the blade could reach its target, Queen moved. She was faster than any human could follow, her ancient body pushed beyond its limits by something more powerful than training or instinct. By love. She caught's wrist in her hand. The blade stopped inches from Danny's chest. The general's eyes went wide with shock. No one had ever stopped him before. "You forget," said, her voice low and dangerous, "that I have been a warrior far longer than you have been alive." She twisted his wrist. The blade fell from his grip. With her other hand, she struck him across the face with enough force to send him stumbling backward. "Guards," she called out, "arrest General for attempted murder of a member of the royal family." This time the soldiers did not hesitate. They grabbed before he could recover, forcing him to his knees. His iron scales scraped against the floor as he struggled. "This is not over," he screamed. "There are others who think as I do. The Empire will never accept this. You are destroying everything we have built." Looked down at him with something close to pity. "No, General, I am building something new." She turned back to Danny and the human was still holding his daughter, his tears finally slowing. Had her face buried in his shoulder, but she was not crying. She was smiling. "Come," said, extending her hand to them both. "We have much to discuss, and I believe our daughter has waited long enough to know her father." Danny looked up at the queen who had captured him, imprisoned him, hidden the truth from him for years. He should hate her. Part of him did, but a larger part understood. She had been raised in a society that taught her emotions were wrong, that love was weakness, that family was a burden, and she had broken free of all of it. He took her hand, reached up and took her mother's other hand, and together the three of them stood before the stunned court. A human, an alien queen, and the child who bridged their worlds. It was the beginning of something that had never existed before. A family. The night that followed the throne room revelation was the longest night the Empire had ever known. General had been arrested, but his soldiers were still loyal to him. His allies among the noble houses began to gather in secret, whispering about rebellion and purification and restoring the old ways. By midnight, the coup had begun. Forces moved through the palace like shadows, killing guards and taking control of key positions. They thought they would find the queen unprepared, distracted by her emotions, weakened by her attachment to a human. They were wrong. Queen had not survived 200 years on the throne by being unprepared. The moment she saw hesitation in his eyes, she knew he would try something. While she was holding her family in the throne room, her loyal guards were already moving to secure the palace. But Even could not have predicted what happened next. Lisa had been organizing the human captives for months. There were nearly 100 of them scattered throughout the palace, servants and laborers taken from human ships and colonies over the years of war. They had learned to be invisible, to move without being noticed, to survive in a world that saw them as less than nothing. That night, they stopped being invisible. When soldiers tried to take the communications center, they found 12 humans waiting for them with stolen weapons. When they tried to capture the power generators, they found more. Throughout the palace, small groups of humans appeared at exactly the right moments, blocking advances, warning loyal guards, creating chaos in the rebel ranks. They were not warriors, they were cooks and cleaners and mechanics, but they had something the rebels did not expect. They had worked together. They had trusted each other. They had hoped together for years, dreaming of the day when things might change. And now they were fighting for that dream. Danny wanted to fight too, but would not allow it. She placed him in a secure room guarded by her most trusted warriors, and told him to protect their daughter no matter what. So Danny held through the long night, telling her stories to drown out the sounds of battle. He told her about Earth, about blue skies and green grass and the way rain felt on your skin. He told her about his mother, her grandmother, who would have loved her so much if she could have met her. "Will we ever go to Earth?" asked, her small voice tired but curious. "I hope so," Danny said. I want to show you everything. The mountains and the oceans and the cities full of people. I want you to taste chocolate and feel snow and hear music playing in the streets." "What's chocolate?" Danny laughed despite everything. "It's the best thing humans ever invented, sweet and rich and perfect. You'll love it." Smiled and pressed closer to him. "I already love it if you love it." By dawn, the coup was over. Forces had underestimated the Queen's loyal guards and completely failed to account for the human captives. The general himself tried to escape in a stolen ship, but was captured before he could leave the atmosphere. When the sun rose over the Crystal Palace, stood on the highest balcony and addressed her empire. "Last night," she said, her voice carried across the planet by broadcast systems, "traitors tried to destroy your queen and your princess. They failed, but they have shown me something important. They have shown me that our empire is sick." Across 1,000 worlds, stopped what they were doing to listen. For generations, we have been taught that emotions are weaknesses. We have been taught that feeling nothing is the highest form of strength. We have conquered the galaxy with this belief, but at what cost? We are empty. We are hollow. We exist, but we do not truly live. She paused and her voice softened. 3 years ago, a human prisoner taught me another way. He taught me that love is not weakness. Hope is not foolishness. Family is not a burden to be avoided. These things are gifts, precious beyond measure, and we have thrown them away in the name of cold logic. She reached out her hand. Danny stepped onto the balcony beside her, holding in his arms. The princess waved at the broadcast cameras with a bright smile. "This is my family," said. "A human who showed me how to feel, and a daughter who shows me every day what we can become when we stop being afraid. I will not hide them anymore. I will not be ashamed of love." The broadcast reached every corner of the empire. On 100 different worlds watched in shock. Some were angry, some were confused, but many, more than anyone expected, felt something stir inside them. Something old and forgotten, buried under generations of cold teaching. They looked at the small princess laughing in her father's arms, and they remembered. They remembered what it felt like to care about something beyond duty. They remembered warmth. Within a week, messages began arriving at the palace. Thousands of them, then millions, from across the empire, writing to say that they too had felt empty, that they too had wondered if there was more to life than cold logic. Parents wrote about children who smiled too much and asked too many questions. Young wrote about dreams they had been afraid to pursue. The princess had become a symbol, not of contamination or weakness, but of hope. 3 months later, Queen sent a message to the human coalition. It was simple and direct. She wanted to end the war. She wanted to talk. The humans were suspicious at first. They had been fighting for years, losing ships and lives to an enemy that seemed to feel nothing. But the Queen's message was different from anything they had received before. It spoke of mistakes and regrets. It spoke of wanting to build something better. A delegation was sent to Velar Prime. When they arrived at the Crystal Palace, they were greeted by a sight that made them stop and stare. Princess was waiting for them at the landing platform, holding her father's hand. She smiled and waved and asked them about their journey. She asked if they had chocolate. The human diplomats looked at each other in confusion. This was not the cold, terrifying enemy they had expected. The negotiations took months. There was too much pain on both sides, too many losses that could never be recovered. But slowly, carefully, an agreement took shape. Not just a ceasefire, but a real alliance. Trade routes would open. Cultural exchanges would begin. Humans would work together instead of killing each other. On the day the treaty was signed, Danny Cole stood beside Queen in the great throne room. He was no longer a prisoner. He was the official ambassador of human relations, a title the Queen had created specifically for him. "Are you happy?" asked him quietly, as the diplomats celebrated around them. Danny watched running through the crowd, playing with the children of both species who had come for the ceremony. His daughter was laughing, and the sound was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. "I never thought I would be," he admitted. "When I was captured, I thought my life was over. I thought I would die alone on an alien world, and no one would ever know what happened to me." He took her hand. Her scales were cool against his skin, but he had learned to love that feeling. "Instead, I found you. I found her. I found a purpose I never knew I needed." Smiled. It was still strange to see emotion on her face after 200 years of coldness, but it suited her. "You changed everything, Danny Cole. You changed me. You changed an empire. I just told you stories about being human." Exactly, and that was enough. Years passed. The alliance grew stronger. Half-human children became more common across the empire, each one a bridge between two peoples who had once been enemies. Grew up beloved by both species, a princess who could feel and think and dream in ways no pure ever had. She had her mother's strength and her father's heart. She had silver scales that glowed with warm light and brown-flecked eyes that saw the best in everyone. And sometimes, late at night, she would sit with her father on the palace balcony, looking up at the stars. She would ask him to tell her stories about Earth, about chocolate and rain, and the way autumn leaves fell from the trees. He always did. Because that was what humans did. They told stories. They shared their warmth. They loved without limit. And sometimes, against all odds, that was enough to change the galaxy.